question, and then our staff is going to ask follow-up questions. Take a minute and respond to the question, then we'll go to the next one, and then it'll give you a chance to share your story within the talking points. So really, if you could share, really, how did you get started? What were the things that you needed to do, maybe as an undergraduate, that sort of helped prepare you to make your next steps? And maybe you didn't do those things as an undergraduate, but most likely you did as an artist. So maybe we can start with Denise.
Well, I'm a class of '84, so probably the oldest one on the panel. And I felt at the time lucky because I really knew what choreography interested me. And so the Paul Taylor Dance Company was the company that I sort of zeroed in on. We got to do a repertory piece from Paul's, and so that allowed me to sort of focus before I graduated. And before I graduated, I spent time one summer attending workshops and trying to worm my way into the existence that Paul would actually know possibly what my name was, who I was. And so it felt important to me to see what would be the best way for me to gain a little bit of acknowledgement, not just for who I was as a dancer, but literally to remember who I was. And that meant repetition, and that meant attending, and that meant trying to be in his face as much as possible, so that when I did get an opportunity to arise, that I would have that leg up on somebody who was just walking in and was a number, and they didn't know who that person was. So I felt that was an important. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I graduated in '05, and where the work that I'm doing at present, I didn't necessarily plan to go in this direction. The path just kind of turned that way. But, you know, just growing up in South Carolina with my mother, who was definitely involved in a lot of community social activism there in the town that we grew up in, that was just a part of me. And then coming here to study theater more so, and beginning to really see the power that the craft has to really help human beings to grow and to develop. And when I was performing with a theater called the Steel Theater down on 42nd, they're also a part of an organization called the All-Stars Project, that is a development organization that has a performance-based model. And after performing in that show and doing some volunteer work with their theater program, being more exposed to their methodology, even by another alumni from Purchase from the Theater Conservatory, I just began to learn more about them, and an opportunity opened up for me to take over their youth theater training program. And so I took that on, and just, I don't know, it's been a process for me there, but it's really taking a lot of the tenets of the craft and just putting it into practice and helping people to grow and learn through development, because a lot of the work is based off of a former Soviet psychologist by the name of Lev Vygotsky, who talks about human growth and development through playing, pretending, and performing. So it's really just being more immersed in the craft itself and doing a lot of studying human development and really just being engaged in this fashion and working with many young people throughout the public schools here in New York, in the 5 boroughs of New York.
Hi. So this is about how we started out.
Yes, yes.
So it's such a long time ago.
Think back.
In the late 80s. I will also say in my professional life, I'm kind of surrounded by Purchase grads, interestingly enough. Most of which I didn't know in school, but sort of have come to know through the sort of artistic communities in the New York, tri-state area. In fact, just had one yesterday who came to talk at the college course I teach in Connecticut. So I think in that time period, of course, you're talking about there's not a lot of support for artists, sort of professional practice stuff that happens now. And so you had to really kind of find your own way. I think there's a lot more support for artists with the internet and organizations like Creative Capital and LMCC and NYFA and all these didn't really exist then. So when I got out of Purchase, I think the only thing I knew was that I wanted to work with artists, I wanted to work with art, and I wanted to be in my studio. So I didn't know what that criteria, how that would play itself out in my life. And so I think I will say more when we talk about what we're doing now. So it was kind of a different kind of trajectory. I knew I wanted to do those things, and I started by framing artists' work so I could be in my studio, building artist communities. I've always been a very strong advocate for artist-run culture, artists supporting artists and stuff like that. And that has kind of evolved into the stuff that I do now. And I wear a lot of, like many artists, wear a lot of different hats. I say to my professional practice students, if you're not willing to have 5 full-time jobs, you better find another profession. And I'm only half kidding. And because of this, the way that things were and are now, the kind of support that exists for artists now, I developed a very rigorous professional practice course that I teach to BFA students and also master's students and also to professional artists, which is really practical, pragmatic, like how do you put a portfolio together? What does it mean when they say they need a digital file? Writing artist statements, everyone's worst nightmare and stuff like that. Because of the fact that I, as a young artist, had to kind of find my own way through that. So I do a lot of work around supporting artists in that realm. So I'll just say that.
Thank you. Hi everybody, I'm Rachael. I only graduated a few years ago, so I guess that makes me the baby on the panel, and I'm just kind of like getting into my career right now. So maybe a different perspective from me on things. So I was an arts management student, and I kind of started from a place knowing that I loved to support and work with artists. And all of my friends here were artists in different disciplines. My background is actually in dance, but I was gravitating towards a lot of musicians. And then I just kind of organically started organizing shows here. I did a show at the PAC that turned out to be my senior project called South Bay Cabaret. I did shows in Culture Shock. I started just organizing, and then getting really good at it and realizing that artists needed somebody to do this for them here, at least on this small scale. So I graduated. Before I graduated, I had a ton of different internships. I just wanted to get my hands in as many things as possible, and I wanted to work for prestigious organizations as well. So I interned at BAM, I interned at New York Foundation for the Arts. I interned in the theater department here. It was my first internship. And then I kind of, moved around too in my professional career. I started here as the company manager of the Performing Arts Center. Then I went to Columbia Artist Management, which is the oldest classical music booking agency in the United States, I think. And then I've been at BRIC now for over 2 years as my full-time job, and this year have just launched my own business, which is a presenting curatorial for-profit organization. And I'm booking at different places around the city. I'm the talent buyer at this small venue in Greenpoint, Brooklyn called Manhattan Inn. And so I'm just trying to figure out what the model is for me as a for-profit presenter, which is I haven't seen a lot of. I'm just finding my way right now, but I did get started by just kind of getting my hands in as many things as possible.
Hey there, I'm Ryan Homsey. I never even thought that I was going to go to college when I entered studio composition program here at Purchase, which is now the program that I've been teaching in for the past 8 years. I was 24. Prior to my time of attending college here, I was a professional dancer for 7 years. None of my role models in the arts ever went to college, so like I said, I really never imagined doing that. And then prior to dance, I was involved in music. From a very young age, I performed in a handful of different ensembles, played piano, a variety of other instruments. Had the opportunity as a young person to tour the country in one large ensemble that was made up mostly of accordions. I played marimba. It was the Accordion Ambassadors. We played at places like Mount Rushmore and Niagara Falls, and from a very young age, I had this opportunity to be involved in recording sessions and sort of conduct myself as a professional artist. Throughout high school, I gravitated more toward musical theater and choirs and show choirs. But when I came, I knew that I didn't want to be a dancer forever. I knew that I didn't want to be a choreographer. I knew that I didn't want to be a teacher. I knew that a dancer's life is sort of short-lived, but I knew that the life of a composer, God willing, is as long as the life of the composer. And so for me, coming to college was actually a process of retiring from one career and sort of reinventing myself. And my time at Purchase just built upon that, that idea that there's this real interconnectedness of the arts. And to be really frank, there weren't a lot of other conservatory programs that were interested in welcoming a dancer who didn't quite have compositional skills or compositional repertoire, under my belt before coming here. But music is sound through space. Dance is movement through space. So there's a lot there, and a lot of what I do now, I write music for dance. I write music for theater. I write music for the concert hall, and I definitely build upon my background as a dancer as I work toward these other new projects and endeavors.
Thank you. So our next question is, if you could talk a little bit about the key elements that you have found most helpful in your own self-branding and self-marketing and promotion.
For me, I had to transition, like you just said, you can't be a dancer always. Everybody wakes up in their 40s someday. And so that means that there are very few dance professions that allow for 45-year-old dancers, unless you're Jody Melnick, who's an alum here of Purchase. So I found myself seeking to rebrand myself from this performer. And at the time, it was the height of the AIDS crisis. And so there were 2 dancers who were dying in the Paul Taylor Dance Company at that time. And so, as so many times, you're called to action, and so therefore you create something based on the needs of what's happening around you. So I found myself being active in that community of activism about people who were dying of AIDS. And it just seemed to sort of organically happened because of that, what was surrounding me in that company. We were marching in a pride parade in 1993, and we kept dancing down Fifth Avenue, jeting in front of Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, that was in front of us. And Tom Viola, the executive director, was like, "Who are you people?" And like, dancers responding to AIDS. And he's like, "Maybe you should come talk to me," because realizing that I had this energy and this drive, but the capacity to sort of sell myself, the capacity to really be able to make a difference with fundraising and with reaching and touching people was very limited in a commodity such as dance that is not one, as opposed to commercial theater. So the commercial world has a wealth of opportunity of making money, and where the dance world has very little opportunity of making money in a real sense. So it allowed me to join forces with an organization that had a real solid structure, so therefore I could focus on the dance community and touching dancers and reaching dancers to raise awareness, raise funds, utilizing their talent, and therefore having the umbrella of another organization, so we collaborated together, so that it's dancers responding to AIDS under we're a program with Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. And over the years, as the AIDS crisis has changed, in 1996, protease inhibitors were introduced, and suddenly we were responding not to the mortality of people with HIV, but people living with HIV. And so it became our goal to help that community as well. And as time went on and people are living with HIV, we realize there's more work that can be done in a broader sense. And the first sort of expansion or rebranding of Broadway Cares is the idea of touching women's health issues, that women were a huge component in caring for people dying of AIDS. So therefore, why not turn around and give back to that community that was helping us? So we began the Phyllis Newman Women's Health Initiative, where we started funding programs for women's preventative health. And so today, we not only fund over 450 AIDS and family service organizations, but over 7 programs at the Actors Fund that are providing services for performing artists, whether you're a costumer, a dancer, singer, actor, whatever, stage manager. There's a wealth of human resource services that are available at the fund, and we are supporting all of those, so it's not just inability with HIV. The other aspect of sort of reconfiguring how we labeled ourselves is that with the recession in 2008, there was a huge food insecurities system that was happening around the country. And there were a lot of organizations that were helping people living with AIDS as food pantries and such, and they expanded those to touch the greater community of those who were food insecure. So now we have a whole food program that is funding a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, as well as still providing for those who are living with HIV. So there is, over 20 years, we've had to find new ways to make ourselves sustainable, make ourselves viable within the same structure of what it is we started.
For the work that I do with the All Stars Project, the organization itself has been in the New York City community for over 34 years. So there was that I basically came into to have. Also, in the time that I've been with them, I've pressed out into the communities, into a host of schools, public schools, just doing presentations for numbers of young people that will range from 26 to 1,000 young people at one time. And we target really poor and working class communities, and giving them the opportunity to really have the chance to get into the mainstream and be exposed to it. So just that, running off at my big mouth, running between all 5 boroughs, and then I would have to say Tony Danza is another big resource in that, because he moves around getting the word out just as much, and sometimes more so, than I do. And so there have been a lot of people who have gotten in contact with me because of their relationship with him, and him letting them know the work that we're doing, you know, from Lieutenant Governor in Pennsylvania to HBO and a host of others. So a lot of that has been given to me from this organization, like I said, has been out there for 34 years, and also has a presence in 5 other cities throughout the US. And like I said, my constant going into the communities, doing these presentations, as well as not just Tony, but the other artists that we work with that are getting the message out about the work that we're doing.
So I'm not really sure how to answer a question about branding. So I think I will just tell you a little bit about the different kinds of things that I do. And as I said, I wear a lot of hats, as many artists do, and I think that's partly, you know, my nature and my interest in kind of doing different things and not doing the same thing all the time, and also just the realities of kind of building a sustainable career as an artist. So I'm a working artist, a studio artist. I do painting, drawing, sculpture. I'm sort of multidisciplinary, as well as installation and stuff. I also am an educator, so I teach at a small college in Connecticut, part of the University of New Haven, and in the BFA program there. I've also adjunct here, actually, too, and other places. Also as an educator, I develop programs for museums and K through 12, curriculum-based programs that are connected, that are curriculum connected or exhibition connected, often in the realm of the STEM to STEAM debates. I've been very involved in that. And you guys know, in the core curriculum is science, technology, engineering, and math. And there's a movement to get art in there to make STEM STEAM. So I've been part of that in my work, both as an artist and an educator, and also as a curator. So I'm also a curator, so I curate exhibitions in my own space and also at other spaces around the area. And the recent exhibitions that I've curated have often been connected to art, the sort of interconnections between art and science and art and technology. That's an area I'm very interested in. So then I also run a project space in Portchester, which is right near here. I live in Manhattan and I work in Portchester, which is kind of connected to my relationship to Purchase in some way, sort of remaining connected to this area. And the project space is a gallery, but also I ran as a gallery, sort of a more, what we would call now a traditional gallery, right? Exhibitions and gallery talks and stuff like that. And for 4 years, I was the director at Concordia College, the gallery at Concordia College. And when I left there and came back to the studio, I mean, I always had the studio, but came back to my own space, I thought, I really want to do something different. The world is changing, my sort of interests are changing. I was much more interested in doing interactive projects and being more nimble. And it's kind of in response to this idea that, the way that commercial spaces and nonprofit spaces kind of remain viable and sustainable in today's world. So I developed a collaborative workspace residency program, which is a program where artists come in groups of 2 or more and take over the gallery space for a month and create any kind of project they want. People submit proposals. And I did have a proposal, was it last year, from 2 Purchase students who did this amazing month of social practice events. We had a coffee house, we had burlesque dancing lessons, we had a conversation on religion with some religious leaders. They did a whole series we had a micro-granting dinner in the gallery, so that was their project. We've had projects that were related to the environment. We had projects that were theater for avant-garde theater for young children. So all sorts of events have happened, and that came out of my interest, just my own interest in wanting to kind of expand the idea of what an exhibition is, rather than things that hang on the wall in a passive way. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because I love that too. I don't actually think that they're passive, but wanting to incorporate also, in addition to that, activities that were more interactive and stuff like that. So all of these activities kind of add up to what is my practice. I consider my educational work, my curatorial work, and my own studio work all as part of my practice as an artist, and I think that's a sort of a very contemporary kind of attitude towards practice. Rather than thinking of it, I'm an artist in the studio here and I'm an educator over here, I consider them all part of my artistic practice, and that has influenced the way that I interact with museums and schools, etc., and curatorial spaces when I come at it thinking this is an artistic project. So I think that's a sort of a very interesting way to look at it. And again, I'm a big advocate of artist-run culture and supporting artists, so that I do a lot of work in that area, supporting artist-run spaces, developing opportunities for artists to exhibit their work, especially if they don't come from a position of privilege where they have those opportunities and stuff like that. So I don't know if that says branding, but we're on Facebook. I mean, we do social media. But I'm an independent artist, so it's a little different than organizations that have a structure that have it. So basically, I do a lot of different things myself, and I have an assistant, and we kind of we put our heads together and create a kind of a media strategy for every kind of event that we do. And when, of course, I'm working with other organizations, they have media strategies themselves. So.
Can I get the question again?
I talked too long.
No, by the time it gets over here, I forgot what the question was. Sorry.
Key elements for self-branding and promotion.
Key elements for self-branding and promotion. So yeah, it is hard, and it's very different for somebody, like Patricia just said, that is as an actual organization versus somebody that is promoting their self as an artist. Some key parts of my branding, I really pride myself in being somebody that supports artists, and I have a great reputation with artists, and something that I do to make that happen is I'm always out in my community, I'm always seeing shows, I'm always having coffee with artists, I'm helping them strategize on how to promote themselves. So HYPNOCRAFT is my company, and I do a few different things. So I will act as a talent buyer or booker for a venue. I will produce a project for an artist, usually an interdisciplinary project with moving pieces that are, dance with film and video art and music. So I'll act as the person who's organizing that, who's promoting it, who's doing the ticket sales for them, and I just kind of manage that project for them. I will also act as a curator at an organization. So I do all these different things, but all of them start with, I'm getting the gigs because I'm out in my community and I'm supporting artists, and so I guess that's a key part of my own branding. Yeah, that's all I have to say. And I think that all of, to get to a level where you're functioning, you have a company and you're functioning in all these different ways. A key element of that is just persistence and never stopping and pushing. And that's just where my head is at right now today, so that's all I have to say. Sorry.
It's good.
For me, like Patricia, I wear a lot of different hats, and I see my role as a mid-level administrator and as a advisor and a composer and as a professor as being all really interrelated. But a big part of my process of self-branding as an independent artist has meant trying to narrow down what that is. I think when I first came to college, I wanted to write for everything. I'll compose anything, and I prided myself on being able to write for a lot of different projects. But I took a lesson from a former singer and dancer that I worked with. She was a Broadway singer, and she said, I don't put on my resume that I can do dance. And I said, well, why wouldn't you do that? You're not really showing your whole self. And she said, if I say that I also dance, then I'm going to get cast in the roles for singers who can dance, which is not the same kind of prestigious role that she wanted, where you just focus on singing. So she was a good mover, but she kind of kept that. She didn't really play that card. So for me, I think I wanted to write for film scores, and I wanted to write for songs, and I wanted to write for everything, but the self-branding for me was a part of a reflective process, going back to my earliest passions in my art form. What was I drawn to? When I think back, I go, I didn't really watch a lot of movies, so maybe I'm not the right person to be doing the film scoring. And I didn't follow all of the hottest, latest bands. But what I did do is, I had this background in dance, and I think there are only a handful of professional composers who actually had a career as a professional dancer, and that's really interesting. So I can leverage that, and now I know a little bit more about what it's like to translate from dancer speak to composer speak. I also look back in high school, and I had friends who wrote poetry, and I was the person who took all of their poems and set them into songs and art songs. So now a big part of what I do is writing choral music, setting poems and setting texts for choral works and art songs. So it's going back, what did I first love? Where do my individual strengths lie? And how can I maximize those strengths? So now today I like to say that I do music from dance, from my dance background, choral music, kind of this setting, this text, and music for the theater, from connecting my theater background. I think as artists, we do really all have so many abilities, and they're kind of far-reaching, but sometimes in terms of branding, I think we need to rein it in.
So, my question is that, as you know, networking is one of the key concept strategy that we have in our development, and we work a lot on the networking with students. So I'm wondering if you can share what kind of role did networking or relationship building play in your success, or how did that help you succeed in your area?
Well, the nice thing about getting older is you know a lot more people. And it is true. You make these friends, you make these relationships here at Purchase, and they will stay with you for 30 plus years or more. So I'd never underestimate the composer who's, a little geeky right now, and then boy, oh boy, they, so in that sense of like who you are as a person at 20 isn't necessarily who you are at 50, but you still have those connections that you made then. And your ability to see what it is you need, and it's not selfish, it's what you need to do for yourself. And that idea of like remembering who and what and how you can make those connections, or the idea of developing those skills and how the people that you meet and that grows in that extended community. As a person, now I sort of am this quasi-presenter, is where I utilize the talents of the dance and theater communities to create events that raise money. So therefore, I'm utilizing these talents and trying to connect dance companies with possibly other choreographers, or connecting donors of mine to dance companies who need funds too. Because people have a lot of money and they like to give it around. It's not necessarily just because someone gives me money, doesn't mean they're not going to give money to your artistic pursuit as well. that there's a, and so therefore making those connections not only at a artistic level of the people that we meet here, but also at another level where those people are, maybe they're not artists, they don't turn into artists, but they can turn into dance enthusiasts or art enthusiasts, or they become that donor that you might want to cultivate later in your career. As far as another part of networking is knowing who you're trying to reach and making sure you might have to cater. It's hard in the arts when you want to create based on what it is in your soul and what you want to do. And sometimes there is those moments where I produce this event called the Fire Island Dance Festival that is, this wonderful dance event out in Fire Island Pines. But I have a really specific audience that I need to serve. They are very wealthy, white gay men. And so therefore, having a lot of really esoteric modern dance is not going to get them to come and help me fundraise. Because my ultimate goal is as a fundraiser, as well as supporting the art. It's a full circle thing. I'm raising money for these artists that are helping me for these services that are provided. So I try to find a nice balance between fabulous men with, no shirts on, doing some great, modern dance, as well as then supporting people with their new work that allows them to do what they want to do, what they are filled and compelled to do. And I've got a donor who's like, they don't care. They want their name on the top line of the list of donors. They're not really concerned so much possibly. But if that is supporting that artist, everyone's happy, But it's an unusual situation, my situation. Normally an arts presenter is just basically going on what they feel is the need for their festival or their what they're presenting. But it doesn't hurt sometimes, I think, to think about who it is, who might be your next donor.
Networking is discovering more and more just how key it is. From being cast in from one show to a television show, stage show, television show, or whatever it is, that plays a part in there, of course, as an actor. As this program manager at this particular program, I've been able to shape this program into something that it really has never been by way of my network. Tapping into a lot of the relationships that I gained while I was here at Purchase, from people in the music conservatory as well as in the theater conservatory, and I'm always hoping that at the dance conservatory, to bring them in and for us to sit down and just talk about some things that we would like to create and do and expose the young people to. And program has just expanded in a very short amount of time. But that was based on, really a lot of it was based on that network that I was able to develop, even exposing young people to the theater culture, giving them the opportunity to come see performances here at Purchase, to see performances with the Atlantic Theater Company, going out and touring the Juilliard School. All of that was based on connections that I got that really, in all truth, stemmed off of this campus. And so, it's I can't say enough about it. It's key. It's something that we definitely drive home with our young people. We have full-out workshops with young people in many of the Fortune 500 companies that we partner with, and workshops in just networking and how to network, how to exercise that muscle. So I find it's extremely, extremely important, and definitely, as was said, those relationships that we have now that might be the person that was a little interesting, I don't know, but graduating in 05 and then 2015, and you're saying, oh wow, I remember so-and-so, and we kept in contact. Let me contact that person and see what we could possibly do together. That just turns into this awesome thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is your first art community, you know? I mean, I always say to my students, look around this room. This is your first art community. And I want to echo some of what you said about networking is incredibly, incredibly important. Getting out there and talking to people and not burning bridges. Like, don't be the jerk. You know, don't be the jerk artist, because it will really come back to bite you. I mean, one of the reasons I teach professional practice is to arm artists with information so that they don't have to be the jerk. Do you know what I mean? If you understand how the systems work, whatever systems you're working in, whether those are gallery systems or what have you, and then you're much more protected from the sort of slings and arrows that happen in the kinds of circumstances that we encounter. And the art world is a global space, but it's actually a very local space. And I think I can probably safely say that that's true in dance, and I mean, would you guys agree? It's a global market, but it's actually all built on personal relationships and networking. And you got to get out there and go to your friends' openings and support them, and don't be hawking your wares at someone else's openings, that kind of thing. But if you want people to show up to your projects, then you need to be there for them, and that can be challenging if you don't live locally, or if you're really introverted, which many artists are. But making efforts to do that is incredibly important. Those relationships and networking. I mean, just being in a space enough times where people get to know you and get to see you and get to know a little bit about you is probably the primary way that artistic connections get made. In addition to obviously having the good work and the resume and stuff like that, but they're made through these personal connections. So being out there and kind of putting yourself out there, both on a personal level in your own community, networking in your own community with the artists in your area and the galleries and artistic institutions in your area is incredibly important. And then, of course, applying to spaces beyond and all of that is all part of this networking, and it's just absolutely essential. And I mean, I can't say enough how keeping those relationships, professional and cordial is the most crucial thing, because it really does come back to haunt a lot of artists if they don't treat people well, basically.